Good lesson planning is essential to the process of teaching and learning. The teacher who is prepared is well on his way to successful instructional experience. The development of interesting lessons takes a great deal of time and effort. As teachers, we must be committed to spending the necessary time in this endeavour. It is also important to realise that the best planned lesson is worthless if interesting delivery procedures, along with good classroom management techniques, are not in evidence. A lesson plan is the instructor's roadmap of what students need to learn and how it will be done effectively during the class time. When planning a lesson, you will first need to identify the learning objectives for the class meeting. Then, you can design appropriate learning activities and develop strategies to obtain feedback on student learning. A successful lesson plan addresses and integrates these three components. Objectives for student learning, teaching learning activities, and strategies to check student understanding. Specifying concrete objectives for student learning will help you determine the kinds of teaching and learning activities you will use in class, while those activities will define how you will check whether the learning objectives have been accomplished. To be effective, the lesson plan does not have to be an exhaustive document that describes each and every possible classroom scenario, nor does it have to anticipate each and every student's response or question. Instead, it should provide you with a general outline of your teaching goals, learning objectives, and means to accomplish them. It is a reminder of what you want to do and how you want to do it. A productive lesson is not one which everything goes exactly as planned, but one in which both students and instructor learn from each other.
Now, in front of all of you in pairs, there are props. Okay, some of you have got props, some of you have got photographs. And the question really is population. What have these got to do with population? Okay, so I'm not giving you any other clues than that, and I'm going to give you about a minute to discuss what's your prop got to do with population. Okay, what's it about? Just your prop. So yours is the photograph, yours house brick, yours rice. What's it got to do with population? You've got 1 minute, okay, to discuss it in your pairs. Go. A piece of wood or a bit of tree. How are you? Yeah? What do you think that's got to do with population? Bangladesh? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay.
The teacher gives pairs of students props and then proceeds to ask the students how the props relate to human geography. This is a really innovative and interesting idea because the kind of exercise will be perfect for visual and kinesthetic learners, because the props can not only be seen visually in all their 3D glory, but held, weighted and smelled. The teacher splits the students into pairs so that they can discuss the prop between them, thus utilising a high-yield teaching strategy. She also gives the students a very specific time frame in which to discuss their props in pairs, which can be an effective way to manage time and overall course of the planned lesson. She also uses an effective transition of a countdown at the end of this activity. During this activity, the teacher moves around the classroom providing students with cues and further information for them to develop their understanding. She then has them share their ideas with the class. The teacher also utilises positive feedback, not just being superficially positive with a but tagged at the end of every piece of praise or feedback, as the students generally will focus on negative, which threatens to decrease their motivation. Although this lesson doesn't use technology, I think the use of physical props still makes it an innovative fun, and I believe the students will learn and certainly remember it. Tying the props and their significance into the unit standard is the real magic of this lesson, and allowing the students to make this link themselves really hits home the relevance to them of this subject matter in the real world.
So far this week, we've done 2 of the major measurements of the economy, and what are those 2? Not inflammation. Inflation and unemployment. All right, so today we're going to do the third one, the big 3, and that's GDP. So what we're going to do right out the gate here is you're going to get an index card. You can look at it, but don't show anybody around you what's on it until I tell you what we're doing with it. So you can look at it, but don't show anybody around you what's on it. Okay, here's the deal. You all have a vocab word or a definition that's related to the concept of GDP. When I say go, in about 20 seconds here, you're going to get up and walk around the room and try to find your match. So if you have a word, you need to find the definition that matches it. If you have the definition, you got to find the word that matches it. When you find your match, I need you to isolate yourself somewhere in the room so you get out of the crowd. You with me on this? So go to that back corner, come way up here. I don't care where you go, just get away from the group, because otherwise I have everybody standing together and I can't tell whether or not you found the match. All right, you may not know what these words mean, but hopefully through process of elimination you can figure out. I will tell you that second period got perfect matches. So you have to raise the bar here. So they matched them all perfectly first time. Go! Go! Once you found your match, isolate yourself. That's the important part.
In this lesson, Chris advocates the ability to bounce ideas off people and bring people into the lesson through his direction and the questions asked. This method also allows the teacher to pre-assess them through the questions he asked. This is an effective style of teaching, as it leads students to come to conclusions and judgments by themselves, and at the same time are attaining higher order learning skills. This further increases their confidence in that they will begin to believe and know that they can form educated opinions on their own, and that the teacher is ultimately just a guide or an alternative opinion. It is the teacher's job in this instance to lead them by drawing on what they already know and supplementing it with new information to create linkages in their mind, so that they're not just passive learners acquiring disparate pieces of information which all add up to nothing in the end. Chris also lets his students know that what they're learning is real. Of course, the subject is real and useful with regards to the student exams, but also with regards to students' roles as informed citizens in an increasingly fast-paced, rapidly changing, globalized world. In this demo lesson, the teacher gives students either vocab word cards or definitions cards. Nobody knows each other's yet. The students need to match with their match or other. This seems like a really good interactive idea to get the students involved and seems great for kinesthetic learners. I will certainly keep this activity in mind when planning my own lessons in the future, as I'm certain it is an activity students would both learn from and enjoy. Another great point the teacher makes is to break down stuff into manageable chunks so that any given activity doesn't take more than 10 minutes. This mixes things up and engages students more. Obviously, for this lesson to be effectively taught, an effective lesson plan needs to be drawn up with these components in mind, but also strictly adhered to, particularly with regards to timing.
The ability to bounce ideas off somebody is incredibly important, always has been. That's where better ideas come from. So the ability to talk through a lesson instead of me just going through a list of bullet points, for example, the ability to get some feedback from the students does two things. One, it brings them into the lesson. And once they're brought into the lesson, they're much more likely to ask questions and participate. And the second thing it does is it gives me a little bit of a chance to kind of pre-assess them as we're talking through. That's why I asked them so many questions that refer back to things we did a couple of days ago.
In the two previous lesson examples given, the beauty of effective formative assessments is really highlighted in their integration into the lesson plan. From the start of the lesson, for example, Chris's questions to the students are an attempt to formatively assess their knowledge and understanding from the start. Also, the teachers moving around the classroom to observe group activities individually allows teacher to formatively assess their progress and understanding, allowing her to provide cues and supplementary information to keep students on track or lead them to higher cognitive learning. This is an example of a unit planner we currently use at my school, which is handed down to us by the IBDP. As you can see, it's in a slightly different format. We have the unit description and text, and then we have an inquiry establishing the purpose of unit and the transfer goals. So we go down the list. This is a teaching plan on the First World War, the causes of and nature practices of the First World War. We also have the teacher indicates the learning processes on the right, and different formative assessments are also listed. Under that, we have the summative assessments and the way that the differentiation of this lesson will learn. Then we have approaches to learning, language and learning, TOK connections, which is theory of knowledge, CAS, and also at the end, which is quite good, we have the resources, but we also have a quite detailed reflection on what worked well, what didn't work well, and notes and changes and suggestions. I have to admit that this unit was a real challenge for me. Designing lesson plans first and then have them fit into a unit plan weeks later seemed counterintuitive and backward to my way of doing things. Also, the way that the standards objectives were broken down and analysed seemed somewhat superfluous and frustrating, since this is something I do regularly, though not necessarily in the manner in which the evaluation criteria mandated. Of course, I can see the rationale behind some of the techniques and methods used, which would be particularly useful for somebody who has no experience in this area, and I have to admit, I have learned more about some of the theoretical aspects of why some things are required of a lesson plan and the history and research behind it. I think it would be a good idea to redesign this module so that the unit plan is drawn up first. Of course, though that through the course of the unit this can be revised as candidates learn more about the intricacies and effectivenesses of specific lesson plans and some of the tools and techniques which can be used. Through my own experience planning units as an IBDP teacher and head of department, I usually start with a 2-year plan for the IBDP level, years 11 and 12. Then I'll make a year 10 plan which really acts as a foundation course for the subsequent years. Then once a broad 3-year plan is made, I will create unit plans which span the course of the 3 years. Lesson plans are then usually made to flesh out the unit plans, though these are not made 3 years prior. They're usually made in the days and weeks leading up to the start of a unit. When I have new teachers come to the school, I usually do not force them to use lesson plans, which have already been drawn up and used by myself or other teachers, though of course they are welcome to use and adapt them. However, it is important then to try to fit the general structure of the unit plans so that the overall progress of the lesson fits into the 2- and 3-year plan. Planning ahead means that content can fit into summative assessment schedules handed down by the school and external moderators. It also provides pacing so as content is taught too fast or too slow. Many fieldwork trips and project-based learning experiences also have to be planned a while in advance, and it is also important to coordinate with other subject teachers generally so that deadlines and projects do not clash with the other subject's schedule.